the stock under management.
Sorry, I'll answer this.
Well, I mean, is the Minister the next speaker, or?
The Minister is the next speaker, actually, yeah. So, the Minister, perhaps you could...
Well, if
you're going to conclude then, Deputy? Yeah. No. You speak at the conclusion. At the very end is Deputy Doyle, isn't that correct, Clerk?
I suppose for the purposes of a single farm payment, I mean, one has to be an active farmer, and I'm not saying that non-active farmers should be able to claim in respect of a commonage, but the great majority of farmers, certainly in my constituency in Clare, and I believe across most of Ireland who farm commonages, also farm lands which are not commonages, which they own entirely. So once they are active farmers, even if it's not on the particular commonage, once they're active farmers and they engage in best farming practice in the commonage, and of course, as Deputy Kine has outlined, as Deputy O'Queeve outlined, and as I think is common sense, that if you have 100 farmers with a part share of a commonage, then it wouldn't be best farming practice for all 100 of them to keep 5 ewes up there. It's best farming practice perhaps for 3 of them to keep a large flock of ewes, because that ensures that portion of land is farmed, that best farming practice is adhered to in that portion of land, that it's not having sort of one ewe from 100 different flocks up there every year. So, you know, once someone is an active farmer somewhere, and once best farming practice is adhered to under a grazing agreement, I think it needs to be looked at whether that is land which is farmed for the purpose of a single farm payment, moreover, and whether that could be used to qualify for GLOS or any other scheme which the Minister might be minded to introduce in respect of commonages, because we have to recognise the reality, Minister, that exists across Ireland, that just because you have 100 persons with a share in a commonage, 50 of whom are active farmers, maybe only 10 of them might graze that particular commonage, but that doesn't mean that the 50 who are active farmers aren't ensuring that best farming practice is adhered to on that portion of the land in which they have a common share. And I think that has to be the central criteria from an agricultural perspective, but also from an environmental perspective, Minister, because part of what the commonages offer is they are a very important environmental asset in this state. I mean, they're not just, like, I suppose all of our land isn't just an asset for those who own it and farm it, it's an asset for the broader public, and there is an important, I think, environmental good to be looked at in making sure that best farming practices adhere to, whether it's in the Wicklow uplands, Slievati, or whether it's in the Burren, which is an important tourist resource, and not, I dare say, because of how it's farmed, but rather because of the rare geological conditions which exist there. And they're artificial geological conditions, actually. You know, they are brought about by way of how it's farmed. It's a very delicate balance, and one I think that must be adhered to, and it would be very disappointed to see government introducing a plan which might interfere with that, or might interfere with how commonages have been farmed for generations across this country, particularly, of course, in the west of Ireland, where commonages are more prevalent. Thank you. That's going to cover it.
I think the next speaker is Deputy Andrew Doyle. Deputy.
Thank you, Laska and Corla. But first of all, apologise. I was just unavoidably held up this morning. And to thank Deputy Hayden for moving the debate on the report, and for my colleagues, and I'd like to thank all my colleagues and on the committee for the preparation of the report. And just to say at the outset that we published this report on the 18th of July 2013. We had 7 meetings. It was the rationale behind conducting the report in the first place was on foot of those draft guidelines that were published by the Department of Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, and to the credit of the Minister for Agriculture and others, they didn't then issue letters at the time, and we said it was very important that we drew up some sort of framework on how best to manage commonages. The first thing is that if you want to do a commonages plan and you want to pay people for doing it, it has to have, and its objective should be, to improve the environmental condition of the commonage beyond what the new cap has described as good agricultural and environmental conditions. So I think we have to draw a distinction between what is, first of all, required under the basic payment scheme, single farm payment scheme, and what it is. And we actually have in the report built in 2 different levels, and I think there's, within the rural development programme there are 2 different levels, and I'll come to those in a while. As I said, we met on 7 occasions, and the main issues identified were optimum stocking rates tailored for individual commonages, which means that one size doesn't fit all. The effects of dormancy on preparing a management plan, and that was that the potential of not having the ability to get enough of people to sign up to do an agreement that could make a plan effective to achieve its output, its aims. Collective arrangements and co-ownership, and the possible impact of imposing collective responsibility as opposed to a cooperative approach. And I think that has certainly been an issue that has been worked on hard by the department officials. And I was at an information meeting in Glendalough last night. There was 300 odd people there. There was senior principal officers, and there was 7 department or 8 department officials there in total. They gave a very full and comprehensive outline and explanation, and answered as many questions, and indeed stayed back until everybody was happy that they had their concerns listened to and explanations given. I'd have to say it was positive. I'm not. Anyone that was there will say it. I mean, people have concerns, but they were mainly explained by the people. One that came up in Wicklow a lot was the issue of burning and the burning rules, and there was actually a gentleman there who's managing some of the grouse areas, and they said they've had 1 week in the last 4 years when they could actually effectively burn within the prescribed period. So I think the Department of Agriculture officials at least seem very anxious and very positive towards, improving the burning, extending the burning time. And I think we will need to engage with the Department of Arts, Heritage and Dáil to get that achieved. And then the other thing was about output-driven models. So I suppose if I just go through the recommendations of the report, and there's a couple of key points and a couple of queries that sort of came from the meeting last night. I suppose one of the things, the term commonage, one of the first things we said is needs to be defined. Much of where I am in the Wicklow uplands is national park land. People graze on what's known as old collops, grazing rights. They have rights attached, but they're not part of their folio. They have rights of grazing, and they do have limits on them. So for some people, they can't only graze up to a maximum level anyway. It has worked fairly well as long as there was enough of people active, and therein I think maybe an issue that will have to be addressed, where people have a maximum number that they can actually graze, but yet if there isn't enough of the other people active, that they can't get to the overall by 2018 required minimum numbers. So it's just it just potentially may be something that needs to be looked at. In recommendation 5, we said commonages should be managed by the mechanism of output-driven schemes which maximise specialised knowledge of those who own the commonages. GLAS, I would say, reflects that particular recommendation insofar as that it is an output one. The next recommendation is a one-size-fits-all approach should be avoided. Each scheme should be based on and address the unique characteristics of each individual commonage. And from what I gathered from last night, that's exactly what would happen. There's no maximum set until the management plan is agreed. The minimum is the minimum as 1 ewe per 1.5 hectares. And after that, then there'll be each ewe equivalents for each individual farmer, and they have till the end of 2015 to actually get their minimum stocking rate up. So I'd like to say just one thing about what Deputy O'Quiv said. I live in an area where I don't personally, but many farmers farm with an upland reach. They have a lot of sheep that they keep on commonage. They breed them for sale, for breeding sale. And in actual fact, they keep a lot more sheep than they would ever use for replacements, and store male sheep, which is mainly the other side to it, are actually secondary in many ways. They're very important, but they're not. They don't breed to sell animals as terminal to fatten them. More and more do nowadays, but basically, it's been a problem following foot and mouth, where we weren't allowed export directly or sell sheep directly into Northern Ireland. We would have had in the breeding season this time of year, and Blessington Mart will have it. Baltinglass, Carnew, when Roundwood had one. 10,000 sheep in the sale, and most of them are breeding stock. You go to Blessington any Tuesday at the moment, or tomorrow actually, when they have a special show sale, and the sheep that are there are breeding stock for sale. And there will be store lambs, but the core of it, so these animals are moved. We've people, buyers from the Cooley Mountains, we've people from the Midlands, we've everywhere come to Wicklow for sheep, and it's the same in the West. So you have to understand that it's not the same as having a lowland flock where you're breeding replacements just in the same way you breed enough of replacements in a dairy herd, and the rest of your product is for fattening. It's a different type of sheep farming, and people that don't know sheep farming don't understand that. The Burren Life, which Deputy McNamara has referenced, is the second level. And I think the locally led environmental schemes, which are actually an addition to this, which recognise the value of the Burren in fairness to the Department and the Minister, and the extension thereof of that particular initiative. And we're all hopeful we'll have places that will actually qualify. But those sort of schemes where you set the bar a little bit higher again, in the Burren it's the output, as the people down there say, species-rich grassland is their kilo of beef. So Wicklow Uplands Council have one where a healthy vegetation, a healthy managed vegetation in the uplands is the output that you're paying people to achieve, and you give it to the farmers, you give it to the people who own the land, you let them set the plan. That was the key message from the Burren. And I think the locally led environment schemes will actually achieve that. I think they're really welcome, and I think we're talking about GLAS, and I think GLAS has reflected on the difficulties of trying to get 80% of farmers and the 50% with needed, but if that can't be achieved, you go to the implementation committee for consideration and recommendation. Or as the point that was made last night, if there's only one farmer remains on the Commonage, and yet you can't qualify for GLAS with Commonage unless there's more than one, but you're the only one left, you send in, that particular person would send in their submission to the implementation committee, and more than likely would be approved to be able to sign up for the GLAS. I've mentioned the burning. I think that is really key to it. We would have a particular issue in Wicklow with deer. The Minister's well aware of it, and part of the deer problem is that the vegetation on the hills have become overgrown, too stemmy, not attractive, and the deer are basically getting cute and lazy. They're moving down to lower ground and competing with on the lowland domestic inside ground, as is known, for the grass and vegetation there. So I think it's a key one. I think, you know, there's people in Parks and Wildlife Service need to be absolutely convinced of it. Just two queries that came out of...
Sorry, Deputy, you can make a contribution after the Minister.
Yeah, well, just two very quick queries. Yeah. Sorry, last Count Corl. One was Commonages on National Park land. They tend to be, National Parks and Wildlife Service tend to actually lease them out on 10-month leases rather than 5 years. Now, I know when there was reps, there was an agreement of 5 years. And the second one is eligible land that's deemed ineligible but is recoverable. That if you're in a Commonage management plan next year, and your land would be, rather than have to stack and lose the benefit of convergence, that you would actually, if you had signed up to a Commonage management plan that was going to see that area recover and become eligible, that derogation would be given. I'll conclude after. Thank you.
Minister, 5 minutes.
Thank you. And let me just try and address some of the questions and queries and comments that were made. And just on a general point, what we're trying to do here is introduce a scheme in the case of GLAS, but also in the case of qualification criteria for single farm payment. that is as flexible as possible, that can adapt to different types of farming in different parts of the country. And to say that, for whatever reason, because of where I come from, that I don't understand Commonage farming, it's just, well, first of all, it's not true, because I've spoken to a lot of Commonage farmers in relation to this. But secondly, there's a team of people putting these proposals together. It's not like I sit down at my desk and write it myself. Of course I stand over it because I'm the boss. But I mean, we have people from the west of Ireland, from the northwest, the southwest, from the Midlands, and from everywhere else in my department, sitting around a table, trying to understand and anticipate the problems, the pressures that are on farmers, trying to make sure we can get as many farmers in as we can, while at the same time, obviously, being consistent with the rules. And that's what we're doing. So, I mean, Deputy, first of all, if I was interrupting you as much as I did, I probably shouldn't have, and I just want to recognise that. But I don't want to be characterised here as something that I'm not. We are trying to put in place and have compromised and amended proposals, changed proposals, quite frankly, because of the public consultation process that's been going on. We've been sitting down and speaking to people at very long meetings to try and understand specific problems, and then to trying to tailor solutions that can solve them. And we're still trying to do that in public meetings around the country, in various different places, from Wicklow to Donegal to Galway to West Cork and Kerry and Mayo and so on. And we'll continue to do that, Deputy. So, I mean, I am not in the business of locking anybody out of anything if we can accommodate them. There are historical traditions in terms of how commonage areas are farmed, in terms of how shareholders interact, and they share the burden differently in terms of who does what. And I recognise that. And that is why we have said that, of course, there will be flexibility in terms of some farmers having an awful lot more stock than others, per hectare or per commonage, but that there is, in our view, a requirement that farmers have to be making some agricultural contribution to the commonage in order, first of all, to qualify as a farmer on that piece of land. For a piece of land to be eligible, the person who's claiming the payment on it has to show that they are participating in an agricultural practice, right? Yeah, but as you know, Deputy, payments, eligibility payments are paid per hectare, not per person, right? Yeah, yeah, and there's no issue on the flat land or on lowlands because they're farming.
Sorry, Deputy, could I just let the Minister...
Do nothing, stay at home all year, and get to cut 2 lots of silage out of it. And that's my farming done. I don't actually have to actively...
Minister only has 1 minute remaining, Deputy. So.
We have introduced, as you know, and as you've welcomed, Deputy, actually, for the record, a very low stocking rate in relative terms. 1 euro per 1.5 hectares. In other words, we've been trying to get everybody in as best we can, right? But look, no, but the obligation isn't for that. That's the minimum level in order to qualify as an active farmer. You can go way beyond that, obviously.
So we can take this up again in question.
The reason why...
No.
I won't interrupt again. Can I just
Thank you very much. We have to let the Minister...
Can I just suggest that this is over, that you sit down in a quiet corner with Deputy Kyle, who understands this perfectly, and listen carefully to what he'll explain to you, because Deputy Kyle knows what I know, the reality of this thing.
Thank you very much, Deputy. No.
And I am sure, and I regret that you didn't do that.
So, Deputy, I know you can make a speech, Deputy. In fairness now, that the Minister can...
First of all, well, can I agree with Deputy O'Keefe that Deputy Kine is very knowledgeable in this area. And I have sat down with Deputy Kine on multiple occasions in relation to these issues in order to tease through them, to introduce the compromises that we've introduced and changes, and also to talk about the workings of the implementation group and how that they may help farmers. And I'm continuing to do that on a daily basis. And I've been to your constituency also with Deputy Kine, walking across some of these commonage lands. So the idea that I don't know the reality of how they're farmed isn't true. But if you go to Wicklow, as we've just been hearing, from the last speaker. You have different types of management systems on commonages, different types of hill farming, and the system of hill farming is very, very different to lowland agriculture. I know that. And we are trying to adapt to that and have a non-party political implementation group that is about talking to farmers about the practicalities of getting into a GLAS or making sure they qualify in terms of single farm payment or ANCs or disadvantaged area payments as they know them, so that we can move from one CAP to another CAP and ensure that as many farmers as possible benefit. And that's what we'll continue to do. Just on the 50% participation. Again, this started out as a requirement for priority access into GLAS for an 80% participation, which, by the way, the committee signed up to the principle of having at least 80% of active farmers being part of a scheme, like, for example, the Burn scheme. Yeah, in order to draw down. So the principle of collective responsibility, I think we all agree on. We have made it very clear that again, in order to be credible with the Commission, if a piece of land is being farmed in commonage, in other words, if there's shared responsibility there, if you don't have at least half of the people or at least half of the land in that commonage area participating in a plan, well, then there are credibility issues for the Commission. All right? And if there are practical reasons why we can't get 50% of the land or 50% of the people, well, then we have an implementation group who will go into that commonage, speak to the shareholders, and try to put a solution in place that can work for farmers.
Thank you.
And we will do that in a way that is inclusive, rather than trying to lock people out because they can't meet an exacting criteria. So we are introducing significant flexibilities here, responding to farming organisations and to individual farmers, and in particular to people like Sean Kine, who have been repeatedly raising these issues with me. And that's why we have a group of people going around the country at the moment trying to explain how this will work and the flexibilities that will be there for people. But look, I have an open mind on this, genuinely. If we can put better solutions in place that are there than are there at the moment, I have an open mind to changing. I'm not going to sort of dig my heels in here because I don't want to be backtracking. If there are better solutions, if there's a Welsh solution that works that we can apply here, we'll look at it. Right? We'll look at it. I have no interest in doing anything here that is locking out people who should be getting supports and payments because we want to keep them on the land and interested in the land.
Thank you, Minister.
But at the same time, I do have to ensure that a finite resource is actually going to farmers who are actively farming the land when and where possible. Because if we don't do that, the Commission will come and ensure that we do. So, I want to thank the committee for a very useful report that has helped to shape a lot of the policy that we've done.
And with the agreement of the House now, Deputy Andrew Doyle to conclude.
Thank you, Lasky and Corla. Once again, thank everybody, and my colleague Deputy Hayden for stepping in at the beginning, and to all the members, and thank them for their kind words. In fairness, our committee has, I think, demonstrated that committees can work in unison, come up and be productive. There's not much point in being up here unless you can be productive genuinely, and I think to commend all the members and thank them for that cooperation through many reports. If you just go back to this report was published in July, as I said, 2013. The cap had been agreed, just agreed. We had started our work before that, but the Pillar 2 and the Rural Development Programme hadn't. And we did it against the backdrop of draft guidelines from departments of Agriculture and Gaeltacht, which we felt would not achieve their intended goal and outcome, which was better commonages in better condition. And we set about coming up with identifying the reasons, the concerns, and coming up with a set of solutions by way of recommendations that would actually achieve that same intended outcome. And I think where we've got to today is, with what we have so far, is an attempt to do that. Much better and much more practical. And if you just look at some of the report recommendations again, first of all, a one-size-fits-all doesn't work. I think we have achieved that insofar as that each individual commonage will be dealt with by a commonage management plan. It's going to be laborious, but rather than having a diktat down from a centralised basic, we have a very minimal payment or a stocking rate for the basic minimum payment. But after that, it's up to each plan and the participants therein to agree it. So I think that's very important. We did say that they should be managed by output-driven schemes. Well, DAS is an output-driven scheme, and it is being fine-tuned to make it effective and workable for as many people as possible, and be acceptable to Europe. And I suppose it is worth bearing in mind that this submission hasn't, at least to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been signed off finally by the Commission yet, but hopefully it will. On the Burren Life, then, we definitely identified the Burren Life as a model of where, first of all, one size doesn't fit all, because under REPS, the requirement to have all stock off the land for the winter, bovines in that case, was actually going to damage the environment, as it became famously aware with regard to the hazel overgrowing on the burn itself. So people reacted to it. So we would say there are plenty of other places around the country, but it does take a bit of work. I've seen that myself, and there are other areas. I know Deputy Hayden is interested in doing something on the Curragh, which is unique in Europe and certainly worth considering, but I caution him that there is a good bit of hard slogging and knocking of heads to get together before you get to that. But in many cases, issues like burning, which have been, and we would say in Wicklow, the deer culling season, and the nature of the way that's managed, are very important. Practical changes that need to be made to make achieving your commonage into good agricultural and environmental condition and beyond that achievable. So I think I welcome what the Minister said at the very end, that if he's open-minded, his intention and the intention of his officials, and certainly the feeling I got last night from the officials in the department who were down in Glendalough, was that they felt it was a two-way street. They took on board some of the concerns, like two of them I've just highlighted here earlier, with regard to terms of lease from national park land and how ineligible land that can be made eligible can actually be included in year one, and others. So, and today's debate, I think, has brought back another couple for consideration into the mixing. So, I'll conclude. I know I've some time. I think GLOS. I think maybe one of the things actually we could do as a committee is bring in Joe Healy from the implementation group, following on from this, to just outline his position. I think it'd be a good idea as well, and certainly, I mean, I think I don't know anything about Joe Healy. I've met him a couple of times, but I think he's considered to be, objective and fair. He has to be, because the microscope will be on him anyway if he's not. So I think it'd be certainly worthwhile. I think the committee has made its recommendations back, as I said, in July. I would like to think, and I think we can all take some satisfaction in the fact that a lot of the reflection that has happened in the meantime in devising a rural development programme with the Commonage's aspect to it has taken on board much of what we've said. And I'd say in particular, one size doesn't fit all. I think we could not actually have implemented a Commonage plan on a national basis. Every Commonage is different. There's different dynamics, there's different personalities, there's different reasons why they can or can't work, or they need to work and be set up in a certain way. One other thing that did come up, and it was mentioned here earlier, was about planners. Certainly Teagasc have indicated, they've advertised for planners. They're not going to have enough, but where 3 farmers that are on a Commonage have maybe 2 with Teagasc, 1 with a private planner for EOS, that there's some coming together. And I think maybe it'll be a case where Teagasc, who will subcontract out, if people can agree, would have an assigned planner to them, and make it a little bit simpler. I think it may be just something small, but it's something that could actually hold up getting plans off the ground. And the other thing is that if there is 25 or 30,000 applications accepted next year, that means there'll be more than that submitted. So I think we should try, and I'm not sure if the Minister has any idea about it, for last this is for a closing date, but practicality would say that mid-year is going to be difficult, and at the same time to get everything processed and approved by the end of the year, so maybe some payments can be made at the end of next year, is going to be a challenge. So I think there's a lot of work to do, and I think we need to first of all get sanction from the Commission, and if there's anything I think the committee can do further along the way with regard to GLOS or the locally led environment schemes, I think the committee members will be more than happy to take that on. So once again, thanks everybody, and thank the members. Thank you, Last Councillor, for. We were drawn on this almost a year ago, but we were actually on a subcommittee fact-finding mission at the same day. So we're delighted that we've had the opportunity now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. And that concludes the debate. And I put the question that the motion be agreed to. Is it agreed? Agreed. Just to say a message from Shannon Éireann. The Shannon Éireann has passed the Freedom of Information Bill 2013 without amendment. Tá an Dáil Lógaí Dáil Clog de March Hogan. The Dáil stands adjourned until 2 p.m. next Tuesday. Thank you.